right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to LP Stories, and thank you for tuning in. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, along with Jules Thomas and 𝗟𝗣 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗏. I'm a drummer, composer, author, and educator, and I've been an LP artist for around 3 years now, and DWPDP artist for 20 years. My main instrument is drum set, and I slowly over time integrated world percussion instruments into my playing and compositions. I'm here in my studio in Santa Barbara, California, and before I start telling my story, I'd like to take you on a little tour of my studio to show you my setup and give you a brief overview of how I work in this space. So, where I am now, I like to call the cockpit. And when I'm not streaming, doing clinics or a workshop or any live event, this is my space where I compose. So normally this is my keyboard controller here. And right now you see a piece of material on it. These hand percussion instruments move over to a shelf. That material pops up, and then a chair slides in here. I could be sitting here composing. I have two studio monitors and a video monitor here. So when I'm writing, these two djembes push back behind my cajon. And in front of me is another station with a larger video monitor and two sets of speakers. That's where I do my mixing and editing in this space. To my left, you see more of my instruments. I have a oud clay tone, the monsoon rain stick, tambourine, one-shots, and some other instruments here. So I could kind of get around easily and grab things when I'm doing my clinics. And so that's why I call this the cockpit. Now, I'll show you my other 3 camera shots. Next one. This is the cockpit again, little darker lighting, but you could see my hands closer on, especially on this djembe. So if I'm doing things like finger things, you could kind of get a more close-up shot. Also, I could stand up here and grab one of my shakers, and I have a stand-up shot so you can see me move my body and play a little bit. Okay? Then we move over to, this is percussion station number 2. In the far left corner of the room, you see my Richie Garcia 14-inch djembe, 2 metadrums, the Dharma tonal metadrums, and an LP street can, which is kind of mimics the Brazilian surdo. LP makes regular surdos as well out of wood. They normally have 2 heads. And the surdo is the heartbeat of the Brazilian ensemble. It's the bass tone, that nice low tone. This has more of a deader sound. It has a 1 head, no bottom head, a thicker head on top, and you see my IP bass drum mallet, fluffy mallet back there that I use to play that. And now we're going to pop over to my last shot, which is my drum set. And the kit I have up now is a PDP concept wooden hoop jazz series kit. 8, 14, 18-inch bass drum, 15-inch snare. I have my Paiste cymbals up, 13-inch traditional hats, and there is a speaking mic back there when I do my clinics, and then I have another keyboard and mouse, and monitor back there to get myself in and out of Pro Tools, and the mute and unmute tracks when I'm doing my clinics. So I'm going to pop back here into the cockpit, and I'm going to tell you a little more about the room before I start telling you my story. So I'm in a 12 by 17 space, okay? There's about a 3-foot space between my mixing space here, desk, and the drum set, so I could walk back there. There's 2 box lights up now, so then, of course, when I'm working, performing, doing tracks, composing, for TV and film and records and other things, I shut those lights off and I have different lighting. And I'm able to go down the aisles here because I have theater drapes around me. And then there's an aisle and an aisle this way. And back behind these theater drapes are all my other instruments. I have 4 other drum sets set up, like a rock kit, funk kit, some more 18-inch bass drums at 24. I have the wooden hoop concept 24, kick 13-16. Okay, that's a beautiful thing for rock stuff. And so I have cymbal bags, a lot of different Pisces cymbals that can move in and out, a couple duffel bags of snare drums, more world percussion instruments. So when I'm here working, I could change the palette very easily, move things in and out depending on what I'm working, what instruments I need. And during the lockdown over the last year, I've been working alone a lot, as we all have been. So it's easier for me to swap things in and out. Things aren't in cases, so to move instruments in and out of these spaces are easy. If I'm in this room recording, I bring 2 mics in here. This mic is up for the broadcast. It's also picking up the instruments on the 2 FX djembes that you just heard in the intro. So if you have any questions as we go along, please send your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. Later, in a later segment 8, Jerry Zacharias, LP Artist Relations Rep, will join me and read me some of your questions. All right, so let's move on here. So I was born and raised in Niagara Falls, New York, and I lived there until I was 18. Buffalo, Niagara Falls always had a decent music scene as a kid when I was growing up. I'm Italian on both sides of the family, so hanging out and cooking and eating around the dinner table was always a big thing in my family. My mom always cooked, and we had everyone, all the kids from the neighborhood came over, and it was the same thing at a lot of my other friends' families' homes as well. It was a big hang. There's always an open door policy at my house. When I was in my teens and started playing gigs, my mom would always wake up and cook for the guys after late jobs. My parents were very supportive always of what I did. I was very, very fortunate for that. Musicians Tommy Tedesco and Tom Rotella, guitarists, and Tommy to this day is probably the most recorded guitar player in history, were from Niagara Falls, and they were living and working in LA when I was growing up there, and more on that later. So how did I get into drums and start getting interested in drums? My sister turned me on to drums in a kind of a weird way. She'd be listening to her records in the house. I was 5 at the time. She was 8 years older than me. She listened to a lot of Beatles, The Who, and the Rolling Stones. And there was a surf song at the time called Wipeout. It was a famous snare drum solo, surf thing. And then on the break, on the snare drum, it was and it would play to the breaks. Right? So my sister would be banging that rhythm out on the pillows, man, on the couch in the house. And I started doing it at 5 as a kid and kind of joined her. And that's what started getting me interested in drums. And I would start, air drumming to the records. Well, while that was going on, my parents listened to a lot of big band jazz always in the house, and they loved to dance. So they were always putting on records and dancing to the old jazz, big band stuff. So my dad was always playing his 78 RPM records in the house. And then when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, I was 5 years old, and hearing them and watching Ringo play kind of changed everything for me. So I had a little toy kit my dad bought me. And I started banging around on that. And then my sister kind of played Wipeout on it, and she dented the heads because they were cheap. And I kind of got mad at her. That was a funny story. And then as I started playing a little more, my dad got me a nicer little kit. Still wasn't a name kit. It was something like Telestar or something. It was a 4-piece kit. Excuse me. And I started banging around on that. So at that time, they didn't let you take lessons. More on that later, but they wouldn't allow me to start taking drum lessons till I was 8 back then. So I did play, I played in junior high school and high school stage bands and concert bands. I also listened and got to hear a lot of shows when I was growing up. So when I was around 15, just to jump ahead, I saw Jeff Porcaro play with Seals and Croft. And that's the first time I ever saw Jeff P. play live, which was very inspirational to hear him play live. I also used to hang out. There was a venue called Melody Fair in Buffalo. I'd go see Chuck Mangione, and sometimes Steve Gadd would play with them. So that was fantastic. And I'd go to the Buffalo Auditorium and also a thing called Summerfest. And there I got to see The Who with Keith Moon. Yes, ELP, Johnny and Edgar Winter, Rick Derringer, Aerosmith, ZZ Top, Chicago with Danny Seraphine, and Pink Floyd. So I was really starting to listen to a lot of rock music, and at the time, pop music, which was more rock and roll influenced at the time. So when I started studying, I was 8 years old, and at a music store in Niagara Falls called D'Amico Music. My teacher was Kenny Wagner, and I started learning how to read, and I studied rudiments and practiced a lot on a rubber practice pad. He eventually got me into the Wilcoxon book, which is a series of rudimental compositions. So in junior high, I was in the concert band, like I said, and I was playing suspended snare drum and drum set. At that time, when I was 14 in 9th grade, my dad bought me a 5-piece Ludwig kit with Zildjian cymbals. That was a real special day that I'll never forget. He drove to Buffalo, and there was a store called 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗘 Music, and it was just packed with kits. And I picked out a 5-piece, 6-ply maple Ludwig kit with a chrome finish. Okay, it was a beautiful kit. It was 12, 13, 16 toms, 22-inch bass drum, and a Ludwig standard snare. And I picked out 2 Zildjian crashes, ride, and hats. In 10th grade, when I was 15, I started going to Buffalo and studying with Louis Marino, who was a great jazz and big band drummer, who lived and played in Buffalo at the time, with all the best cats who came in and out of town. He played a lot of shows, and he was a really great teacher. And he opened up my swing, time feel, and independence on the kit. Latin jazz stuff. And I even worked on suspended snare drum pieces with him, like out of the Cerrone book. And so Louis was really helping me become a better player. At that time, I joined a band called Daybreak. We were all in high school, and it was rhythm section with horns. We played the school dance circuit and played stuff like Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and some Beatles. Around the same time at 15, I went to a guitar clinic at D'Amico Music. Tommy Tedesco, the guitarist who was working in LA, was doing a lot of sessions, playing on everything, came into town to do a clinic upstairs at Jerry's place, and that's where I was taking lessons. That's where I used to take lessons with Kenny. Now I was studying in Buffalo with Louis. So I paid $20 and I went to the clinic. Now, keep in mind, there was about 25 or 30 guitarists, and I was the only drummer there. So Jerry, the owner, told Tommy, now I never met Tommy yet. I didn't know his family. I just heard about him. So Jerry, the owner, told Tommy, hey, you got a drummer here today. A kid came in. And Tommy goes, you mean a drummer came and paid $20 to come to my clinic? And And Jerry goes, yeah. And Tommy goes, well, where is he? And Jerry goes, he's right over there. So Tommy came over to me and said, you paid $20 to come to my clinic? And I go, yeah, I want to learn. I've been hearing all about you, and, you know, I want to hear about LA. And he goes, wow, that's great. So Tommy did his clinic, passed out a lot of music. Tommy played a lot of gut string and nylon string stuff for movie scores and TV shows. And so I was starting to study piano at the time. So I was starting to be able to read, you know, besides studying with Louie and working on drum set. I was working on my scales and learning my chord inversions and studying theory with a piano teacher in Niagara Falls at Duraco's Music. So after that clinic, and I was able to, let me segue back. I was able to read some of these charts and follow them because I was studying piano. So then after the clinic, I learned a lot. Tommy went back, and at that time, I was starting to incorporate around the drum set some LP instruments that I was just, you know, picking up and buying at the music stores, like shaker, right? Had an egg shaker that I would play sometimes, you know, playing samba at the kit, you know, that kind of thing. You know, with the bunch, get that thing going with the bass drum. So that, cowbell, I had a samba whistle I would play during breakdowns and that kind of stuff. So Tommy came back 2 years later, and he wanted to sit in somewhere. And at that time, I had a trio that I booked when I was 17 down by the water. And he went to the music store and asked, Jerry, where can I sit in? He goes, you know that kid that was at your clinic? You could go in and go sit in down there. He goes, really? It's his gig? He goes, yeah, there's a couple guys home from music school. Frank Accardo was back from Berkeley, and he records them in his parents' basement. He books the gigs, and they're down there playing. So Tommy came in. He played a whole set with us. It was the first time I ever got to play with him. So I got to use some of my LP stuff that night on the kit, and we hung out. And Tommy goes, are you thinking of moving to LA eventually? And I said, yeah, but I think I'm going to go to Berklee School of Music first in Boston. He goes, well, if and when you come, make sure you call me. He goes, because you got to call Joe Porcaro and study with Joe. So that was fantastic. So I'm segueing back around the same time when I was 15, there was a club in Niagara Falls, the jazz club called the Ontario House, and it was by the Canadian border, literally 2 minutes, and it was kind of in a funky neighborhood. Richard Kermode, or they called him Dickie Kermode, was in Janis Joplin's big brother in the holding company. He was the keyboard player and B3 player. He also worked on that Santana Welcome album. He wrote Samba de Sausalito. Dickie was a great player. And he came back to Western New York, and he was hanging out playing in the OH with a cat named Lenny Refrigiato, who was a drummer from Buffalo, who lived in Brazil for a while and studied samba over there. So Lenny was showing me some samba stuff. He'd come by the house during the day and some bossa stuff. And they were playing at the OH. So Bobby Menacucci, the owner, used to let me hang out, even though I was like 15 going on 16. They sold food there at night, and so he let me hang. So eventually those guys let me sit in. So I was able to play with them, usually a couple songs a night. And I remember the bass player would tap me on the shoulder, man, while we were playing, and he'd go, hey, don't rush, don't rush. Lay back a little more, lay back. So I was able to start feeling that time feel and playing with those guys and finally started relaxing into it more. And it's great playing with other players because they lift you up to their level. So I would go down there as much as I can and sit in. At that time, I continued studying with Louis all through high school. And then I was playing in the clubs with music majors that were home for the summer. Frank Accardo, Pete Melanverni, who's in New York now, Pat Perez, he's in Toronto to this day, great sax player. Get together in my parents' basement, we had a sextet, and I'd record them on a cassette player, and I'd run around and try to get us work. So I was at the OH one night, and I was waiting for Bobby to finish his dinner, and I wanted to play him this tape to see if we could get a Sunday night. So I waited like 2 hours. Finally, I played him a few things, and he goes, all right, you could have Sunday night. So started working there on Sunday nights, which was fantastic. Then I went to another club in town, the Bijou, and I booked us for Monday and Tuesday. So we were working Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, which was great. And then at 17, a guy came back in town, Joe Ruggiero, who was a piano player, B3 player, and he put a band together called Transition, and he happened to see me play at the OH, and he hired me for that band. We played the hotel circuit. We played the OH Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then we started doing the hotel circuit like the Ramada, Hilton's in the area, Canada, Rochester, Buffalo, Western New York area, Ontario, St. Catharines, Canada. And I worked in that band almost kind of up to I went to Berkeley. And I think Jules has a photo of me, picture of that band when I was 17. I think she's going to pop that up. Oh, there I am. Look a little younger. Ha! So at that time, I went to LA during spring break. All the kids at the time would run down to Florida from Western New York on spring break. I went 10 days to check out LA because I knew I was going to be moving there. So one thing that was a beautiful thing, that from the time I was about 13, I always knew that I was going to pursue music. And being from a small town, and this happens a lot of times, people would say, yeah, but what are you going to fall back on? What's your real job going to be? And I just had blinders on. I don't know where I got this from, but I just would say, no, I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to do music like Tommy Tedesco does and Tom Rotella and those guys. That's what I'm going to do. And they kind of would look at me with this weird look like, really? Yeah, but what are you really going to, blah, blah, blah. So that went on from the time I was probably 15, 14 till the time I left. So I went to LA on spring break and I stayed with Tom Rotella and a guy, Billy D'Addario, who was a rock drummer from Western New York, and he was in LA at the time. And I was hanging out at some of the jazz clubs like Dante's was a big jazz club at the time there. And I saw Joey Barron play. I mean, Joey was my age, and he was playing with Art Pepper, the sax player at the time, and it was just burning. And later, I remember I worked with Joey at PIT when Joe Picaro and Ralph Humphrey started PIT, and I was teaching there. Joey was teaching there for a while. Now Joey's in New York. He's a fantastic player. And Tommy Rotella took me on some sessions. And I saw Tommy Tedesco, and I met guys like John Guerin and Shelly Mann, and I got to hang out and watch them work. So that was a fantastic learning experience for me. So I got back home, and 79, I went to Berklee School of Music after I graduated high school. I was a performance major, and I was learning a lot there because I was studying arranging as well, ear training, composition, and all this stuff that was really helping me become a better musician and open up my ears. But I was getting a little disappointed because all the good ensembles were taken by the players who had been there, the students who had been there for 3 years. And even though I was playing at night with guys in rehearsal rooms, I have been used to working 4 or 5 nights a week every week for a couple years or more. So I really had the itch to be playing again, out playing in the public. So I decided to leave Berkeley after a semester, and I left to pursue my career in LA. And I went back to Western New York to my parents, and I joined a show band and worked for 6 months and saved up money to move to LA. One of those nights, I was back at D'Amico's. I was teaching there Monday nights during that time while I was playing in the show band, because Mondays I was off. And I was reading an article in Modern Drummer magazine, and next to that magazine there was a Guitar Player magazine. And in the Modern Drummer magazine, Joe Porcaro and Jeff Porcaro were on the cover, and it said the LA scene. And there was a whole interview with them together talking about the LA scene. And then next to that, in the Guitar Player magazine, Tommy had his monthly article, and there was a chart, and he talked about a gig that he played at the Baked Potato, and Joe Porcaro was the sub on it, because usually Frank Severino was Tommy's drummer in his quartet, but Joe P would sub. So 1 year later, from that date, I was doing that same gig with Tommy at the Baked Potato. And that was a dream come true. And I'm going to tell you how that happened. So I arrived in LA in July 79. I was almost 19. I called Tommy Tedesco. He said to call Joe Porcaro. And I studied technique with Joe P for a couple of years and a variety of other things. He was a great teacher, and we became really good friends. He was always very kind and helpful along the way, not just to me, but to everybody. He had a real open house policy if you needed to borrow instruments, or, hey, Joe P, I got to do a suspended cymbal thing, and I don't have the right cymbal. And, you know, he'd come over, he'd give you the right cymbal, and he said, here, use these mallets. These are the right mallets for it. So he was always there for you, man. He was always there for me. Loved him dearly. I miss him so much. We worked together at PIT for years. Now, how I ended up on that gig with Tommy? Well, you remember when I was 17, he heard me play that one time. So I was studying with Joe. Joe was subbing for Tommy's gig, the quartet in town, in LA. Joe got a studio call at Fox. He couldn't do the gig. So I go to my lesson, and Joe P goes, hey, Eddie, why don't you go do the gig? I'm going to call Tommy and see if it's okay. He goes, he knows you, and he's heard you play. What do you think? I said, really? Oh, I said, wow, great. I would love to. So he calls Tommy, and Tommy goes, yeah. Have him do it. Have him come by the house and pick up 2 records. So I go by the house, I pick up his 2 records, and I go home. I'm listening to the stuff. And I go do the gig. Okay? So I think it was at a club called, in Studio City, there was a jazz club called the Sound Room. That's where we did the gig. It's John Koenig's the second guitarist, who I started hanging out with a lot. Great guitar player. And a guy named Paul Caprito played bass. So I thought the job went okay. I went to my lesson with Joe the next week, and Joe goes, so how'd the gig go? I said, well, I think it went good. And, you know, everything seemed to feel pretty good. And so Joe goes, yeah, I talked to Tommy, and he said everything was good. He goes, now you do the gig from now on. And I go, Joe, what are you talking about? He goes, it's your gig now. He goes, I did it long enough. When Frank's Home from the Road was Frank Severino's gig, he was out with Sarah Vaughan a lot. So he goes, when Frank's out with Sarah, you do the gig. So I was like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. I was like, wow. I said, thank you. That's so, you know, that was so nice. So just so happened Frank was gone a lot at the time. So I was doing the gig regularly. And then Tommy was with Yamaha. So we were doing all these things at the NAMM show. We went to Atlanta. I mean, we were all over the place. And I got to meet and play with a lot of musicians because he would feature guys, different people with the band. Emil Richards, Julie Roberts, the B3 player from Chicago. A lot of people got to hear me play. And I got to, travel some too with Tommy. So that was fantastic. So in 81, I started teaching at PIT with Joe P. and Ralph Humphrey. I also, at the time, was studying odd time signatures with Ralph out of his book. And then I became Ralph's sub for his odd meter and studio drumming classes at PIT when he was out of town. I also studied with a guy from 84 to 85, Lyle Spud Murphy. And I studied composition with him for 2 years. He had a thing called the equal interval system. And his nickname was Spud. And Spud really opened up my ears and really helped me a lot compositionally and arranging wise. At the time, and I'll get into this more later, I was working at a production company called Pulse Productions with a partner, David Alfonso. And the time we were doing additional music for Santa Barbara, the soap, and as composers, and General Hospital. And I remember, coming and using some of those ostinato things that I was working on with Spud in those, being able to infuse them right away into the stuff we were writing for the shows. So Spud, what a great guy. At that same time, I'm in LA working and starting to get more work, and I'm starting to play cowbell, shaker, tambourine in the studio and overdubbing it to my drum set parts. So at the time, this is pre-MIDI. There's a lot of demo stuff happening too. So because there was no MIDI. So there was rhythm section. So it was great as you got to hear yourself a lot. So you do a drum pass, then I would throw, a shaker over it. I'd play, somebody say, hey, we want quarter note cowbell on this, right? So being proficient, playing some basic hand percussion instruments with tambourine, wood block, those kind of things, to overdub that stuff against the drum set parts. So that's what I was starting to do. So just to segue here into some of my influences, I started listening a lot to all kinds of music. I was listening a lot to Miles before I moved to LA, and then continuing. Chick Corea, Max Roach, Philly Joe Jones, Elvin Jones, Mitch Mitchell with Hendrix, Danny Seraphine with Chicago, Steve Gadd on everything he was doing, okay? Ed Green, James Gatson, Jeff Porcaro. I got to hang out with Ed Green for 24 hours once when I first moved to LA. He took me to all these sessions, and I remember listening to Ed, and all that Barry White stuff and everything that he did. That time feel he had is just incredible. And he had like 4 different fills. Badakon, Gadagadon, Bakadagadon, Badagadon. Ed was amazing. James Gatson, great feel. Of course, Jeff. I got to meet Jeff through Joe P. Of course, Joe. And more on that in a little bit. Hal Blaine, Shelly Mann, Ndugu with Santana. I saw him when I was a kid. Then Zakir Hussain. That's a whole other story. All the East Indian stuff that I listened to. John McLaughlin's Shakti. That tabla influence on my hybrid approach to the djembe with all the finger stuff I do. I listened to everything I could get my hands on. Motown stuff, the Jacksons, Michael's Off the Wall, percussionist Ayerto, Paulinho da Costa, which I got to work with the Crusaders, with Wilton and Joe in the studio. Lenny Castro, who I got to sit in with once when I was first got into town. Luis Conte, who worked with me and Jeff on some Sheffield Lab stuff, and Alex Acuna, and many, many more. The list goes on. So my gigs, as I started moving through, as I started working, was very, very fortunate. I never had, other than being a paper boy, which was my job around 11 and 12, 13. When I was 14, I started a band called Crash in junior high school. And it was a 4-piece. And we played a lot of rock stuff, Hendrix stuff. 15, I was in that band Daybreak, the horn band. Then I was sitting in with Richard Commode. That was a big thing for me. Tommy Tedesco Clinic, D'Artagnan, the jazz sextet. We were playing at the OH, the jazz trio when Tommy came to sit in, and then Transition prior to me going to Berklee School of Music, and then the show band, all prior to going to LA. When I got to LA, I did Tommy's gig from 80 through 82. Got to play with Robin Ford a little bit because he was at MI, and we'd do concerts there, and we did some concerts outside of the school too. Fantastic player, rhythm section player. It was great hanging and playing with Robin. I started teaching my groove class and the odd meter performance class in 1980, and then in 96 I wrote core curriculum for odd meters 1 and 2 and taught that class until 2016. That class and my book, Drummer's Guide to Odd Meters, on Hale Leonard Publishing, which is now an ebook, is now my Groovin' in Odd Times clinic that I do all over the country, like at NYU and all the universities. And that material is still going strong, and it's called Groovin' in Odd Times. My first record I did in town, Ralph Humphrey sent me. He sent me, it was a live gig at first, and it turned into a live record. He couldn't make this job, and he sent me 5 nights at the Roxy with the Firesign Theater. Now, the Firesign Theater was a comedy troupe team that guys like Belushi, Aykroyd, and all those cats grew up listening to. They were a little bit more old school than them. And I did a live record with them. It during the rehearsals, it turned into a live record. They signed a record deal, and they did a record called Fighting Clowns. And that was the live shows at the Roxy. And then we did a couple more songs in the studio. I remember Zappa came by, he wanted to play on the record. Jeff Skunk Baxter was in the studio with us. We did this thing in 10/4. I remember he started playing this lick in 10/4, and we did something like that. And that was a fun job. And that was my first record in town. Then Tommy Tedesco recommended me to Julius Wechter, who wrote all 𝗟𝗡 𝗦𝗘's hits in the beginning. And he had a band called the Baja Marimba Band, which he had hits as well, pop hits. And so who was this now? It was Frank DeVito was the drummer. He didn't want to go out, so I went out and did it. It was drum set. And did that tour. And when we got back, again, we did a record. It was called Naturally, and we did that at Gold Star. And just before that gig, I didn't know if I was going to do it because Frank Zappa called me, and I was down at the rehearsal trying to audition for Frank for 3 days. The joke was you either lasted 15 minutes or you lasted 2 days. I lasted 3 days. Frank was sending me home with music every night. It was crazy. Chad got the gig, Wackerman. Chad was the best reader, I think, at the time for some of that orchestral stuff he was playing. He had a couple pieces that were part of the audition that they never recorded or played live to this day. And Frank actually gave me a couple of those pieces to keep. One's called Pre-C Instruments. Chad told me after ran into Chad, I said, Chad, so what about this Pre-C instrument thing? You guys ever play that live recording? He goes, nah, man, it's too hard. We never did it. I was like, ah. Anyways, but playing with Frank and the band was fantastic. And anyways, that was a great experience. And Frank was just, man, he was so knowledgeable how much stuff he knew as far as his music. He knew every measure of his music, every beat. But that's a whole clinic in itself, I could tell you about. Anyways, at the time I was doing a lot, started doing jingles in town, TV spots. Julie Greenberg, who was on the Baja gig, we got back to town, and Julie then later did The Simpsons for all those years. He was one of the mallet players. He recommended me to Benny Golson, you know, Killer Joe. Right? Benny was in town doing cartoon gas company commercials. And I did the first session that we did. David Garfield, I remember, was playing piano. We thought we were going to be playing the Slammin' Benny Golson chart, and it ended up being, you know, orchestral, and all over the place. A lot of odd bars, a lot of tacit bars, rest bars. So you really had to read it. Radamicus, but they got to go, you know, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, bop. Then 7/8 march. Boom, you know, stuff like that. You really had to read it. Didn't take on any kind of form shape. So all that studying of the odd times with Ralph really paid off. Slash, slash, slash with a dot. I knew it was 2 plus 2 plus 3. And it said march over it. And then they're saying don't play a 1 bar, play a 2 bar phrase. So you got to change the march to a 2 bar phrase. Then from there, you're going to 5/4. Then it says, you know, 4/4 rock. I mean, it's all over the place, a lot of rest bars. So got through that, did some more work for him. Then I met Jonathan Wolfe, who later did Seinfeld. And he had a show called Square Pegs. And I worked with him a little bit on that, doing sessions. And then I got a call from him in the middle of the night one night, and he was in Vegas at the Thomas Mack Arena, and they were doing this show that came in from Canada called the Rock World Circus. And the rhythm section got stuck. The rehearsed rhythm section got stuck in Canada because of visa problems. And they were picking up 22 horns in Vegas. So it was a 22 horn, basically huge big band with a 7-piece rhythm section. So John was in there doing this as the MD, and the contractor's son was playing drums, and he got fired by the producer, and Johnny wasn't working out. So they called me in the middle of the night, and I had just finished working at Paramount. It was late, and I had a cold, and they called me at 3 in the morning. They said, can you be in Vegas? We got on a 7 o'clock flight. So I called my cartridge guy. It was drum set with 3 Simmons toms, so acoustic drums and 3 Simmons toms, SDS 5 toms. He packed up all my stuff, and that's when you could go to the airport and literally tip the baggage guys, and he would just throw all the stuff on with the cases, and they would just go through regular baggage. That ended years ago. They grabbed my stuff on the other side, brought it to the Thomas Mack Arena. And when I arrived there, they kind of had everything almost together for me, set up, because Jeff didn't come with me, my tech at the time. So I remember playing 3 shows without rehearsing, you know, 3 music stands, music everywhere. Got through the first one, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and the horn players were hugging me going, oh my God, time feel. And then played an afternoon show and a night show and was there for a week. Then we went back to the Forum, LA Forum, for 2 weeks and played that show. Then I was writing with John. We both had studios. I built my first studio, and I had a partner, David Alfonso, and we were doing rhythm section arranging for all the composers we worked for and the different shows. And then we were doing composing for Santa Barbara and General Hospital at the time. And we were working on other shows with other composers. Like Don Peake, who I had done Knight Rider, was doing that. And then John and I wrote a Ford JBL spot. And I got this 7/8 thing going on because it was a Lamborghini going on this curved road, and it was going back and forth between the shot was car on the curvy road, boom. stereo, Alpine stereo in the Mustang. Boom, back and forth. And I'm watching this thing, man. I'm going, this feels like 7/8. You know, so I got on the keyboard. I think it was a DX7 at the time. I started going, bigga digga 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 on synth bass. And I got the 7 thing that started feeling like the car. And then I had some rolling pads, and I started putting on some percussion and drum stuff with the 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗘 and stuff. And then John started adding things. We started building on it. And, you know, a bunch of people submitted for the spot, but we got the spot, and the ad guys kept saying, I don't know, your guys just sounds different. I don't know what you did. Well, we wrote in 7, everything else was in 4. Everyone else wrote in 4. So the guy goes, yeah, it's really different. It's really different. I go, yeah, it is different. I never told them it was in 7, and no one ever brought it up. So that's one story about John and I working together and bringing in an odd time signature into it, which helped. So in '85, I met Joe Porcaro, introduced me to oh wait, I missed something here. I want to go back. Just Jules, I just realized we never played the video of Joe P for the Talking Shop. Can we play that? This is Joe and I. Before I move ahead, I kind of blew past this. My apologies. We did a thing in 2019 called DW's Talking Shop. And it was at the Drum Channel. And it's just Joe Porcaro and I telling stories. And at the end, Scott Donnell threw a snare drum in front of Joe and handed me a little djembe. And we just played for a couple minutes. And I wanted Jules to share that, if you don't mind. It's a fun little thing. Joe P.
Eddie. Beautiful, baby.
All right. Give it up for Joe P. Okay, so Joe was out walking and he met a guy, Steve Tyrell. Now, Steve Tyrell at the time had a company with Barry Mann. Barry Mann and Cynthia Wilde, they were huge songwriters. Huge list of hits. They had a company called Tyrell Mann. So Steve called me up and he goes, you know, we're looking for some people to come in. We're doing tons of stuff here and trying to get placements and TV film and writing songs for artists. So the first thing I went in and I did a Lynn Drum program. He was working on he had a Ronnie Millsap ballad that he wrote for Ronnie Millsap. And I went into another studio, not theirs, with the Lynn Drum, and for some reason they couldn't get it to sync. They wanted me to put fills on it, on this piece. They already had the drum program done. It was sounding good. And so they're going, oh, we're sorry about this. We're going to have to bring you back in. We're having some technical problems. And I said, well, hold on, wait a minute, man. I'll just play the fills with the buttons on the Lynn Drum. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I said, just open up 3 tracks. There's 3 toms. I'm going to play. I could play flams, you know, black-a-doom-ka-ka-da-ka-doom, and just play the buttons. He's looking at me going, are you serious? I go, yeah, cue it up 2 measures before. You want me to come in? So they cue it up. I play the first fill. They listen back like 3 or 4 times. And I said, plus it's in real time. It feels good. You know, I'm just laying down the middle and I could flam some buttons. So you got a real flam sound. So we do the other 4 or 5 fills that way, and he looks at me and goes, oh, man, this was great. So then he calls me up and he goes, why don't you come in with your partner and start doing some rhythm section arranging for us, you know, because David and I used to do all the drums, synth bass, and comping synth parts and that kind of stuff. So we started working on songs that Barry was doing, that he was writing with a lot of different people. At the same time, Joe Sample was down there, and he was trying to write tunes, and he's trying to get another like Street Life hit for the Crusaders. So I get a phone call, and it's Joe, and he goes, "Look, we're down at 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗖𝗘𝗧𝗧𝗜 in Hollywood. We want you guys to come and work on these 2 tunes with us." So it's Joe Sample, me and Wilton Felder, me and David. So we have all our stuff delivered, you know, his guitar rig, all my drum stuff, drum machines, rack. And we worked on 2 tunes. Just me, Wilton, Joe, and David. And just the 4 of us. Everybody's playing different things, doing what they do. Stuff came out great, so I go back to work at 𝗟𝗩 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦, and Steve goes, "Yeah, man, Joe really likes what you're doing, what you guys are doing." He goes, "He's going to call you for the Crusaders record. They're doing another record on it for on MCA." So I'm going, wow, that would be fantastic if that happens. So about a week later, the phone rings. It's Tom Hooper, the guy who was working for the Crusaders, and he goes, "Hey, we want you and your partner to come and work on the Crusaders album." So that's how that got going, and I worked with Joe and Wilton, and for about a year almost. We worked on that record. We were working on other songs. We were either at the 𝗟𝗩 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦 studio, we were working on the record at 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘𝗧𝗏, and we were at my studio, at my house, that David and I had, and we were working on that. And it was great working with Joe. You know, the guy was just incredible player, incredible time feel, and incredible composer. And he would, no matter what time of day or night it was, if it was 4 in the morning and we were working, his time feel was the same. He loved to hang out. He loved to eat. We had a great time all the time. Great energy. But there was starting to be tension between him and Wilton. And towards the end of that project, then Tommy LiPuma took him to New York, and he did that first Joe Sample album with all the New York guys. I hadn't seen Joe in a while. And one night I was at the Baked Potato, and all of a sudden I looked down, and there's a Heineken in front of me, and the bartender points, and there's Joe. He bought me a beer. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and we got to catch up. So it was great to see him. It was great to be able to work with him, have that experience. That was a great time. So moving on, really got into the writing and composing and producing. Some of the things I worked on over the years, WWE, I had a theme, Monday Night Raw, Fox Sports, Saturday Night Live. Here's something I want to tell you. This is a good story. This is my Save the Composer story. So there was a guy, Brian Adler. He's no longer with us, Brian. Talented guy. He was doing a mini-series for NBC called The 60s. And I get a call, it's at midnight. And Brian and I, we had been writing songs for Movie of the Weeks, pop songs together. And he had this show that he was the main composer on. He was working on strings at a studio for Strings for the Next Day. They ran out of money for the Hendrix songs, Purple Haze and Star Spangled Banner. And it's the Woodstock scene. 2 Woodstock scenes. So they tempted those 2 slots with Peter Gabriel's Passion, which is the underscore that he wrote for Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ. And it's a great soundtrack. He got all these world percussion cats from all over the world, and they hung out in his studio in England, and he did this record, and that came after the movie, and I would definitely say to check it out. It's beautifully soundscaped, great sounding record, great playing, beautiful production. So he calls me up, he goes, they tempted these 2 scenes with this. I can't get my head around this. I'm thinking about strings. I got all this stuff going on. Will you come down here and help me with this? I said, yeah, sure, no problems. So it's midnight. I throw a djembe in the car, grab some hand percussion, and I go there, the studio. So I get there. I see the first scene, and there's clicks going, and he's got this little synth thing going. Kind of coming in and out to this click. So I'm there with my drum, and I start just playing time. Right? And I'm marking the parts as I go. And then two people, they start fighting. They're fighting over a girl, and they're high. And so, I got to pick up the time. So I said, what are we going to do here? Because I wanted to keep the quarter note pulse. So I said, I'm going to go into 3. So make it 3 eighth notes, 3 eighth notes, 2 eighth notes. So 4 dotted eighths and a quarter note. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. That kind of thing where I could start bringing 3s in, so it kind of picks up the time. So I go through, we mark all the stuff. I mark all the parts. And I go, okay, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to do this live. I'm going to get Kirk Biscara to play drum set. He's going to play just kicks, hi-hat, psh, psh, quarter note kick, toms, badakon. I'm going to layer some djembes. Kurt and I will do the first pass. You got your synth thing going. He knew Jerry Goodman, who worked with McLaughlin's Mahavishnu Orchestra. Jerry will play electric violin. Brian wrote a scale for him. Then we hired a guy, Batish, from San Francisco, to play tabla over my djembe stuff in the holes. And he also played sitar. Get him to drone on sitar. We're going to just do this all live. Kurt and I will take a pass, and then we'll overdub some other stuff with all the other guys. And play kind of almost all at the same time, just a couple passes, then a couple overdubs. So we did that cue at Boddicker Studio 2 days later, and we did another similar cue that way. Kurt and I even shook some rain sticks. We had rain sticks. We used as shakers, kind of got a wider sound, which was kind of nice. So, quick way to work. We did both of the cues in a 3-hour session. So I got an arranging credit, paid as arranger, and also as the percussionist. And so that's my Save the Composer story late at night. You never know when you just got to come in and just, boom. And, sometimes, a lot of times, be up all night working and then have to get up at 8 to go to Knight Rider at Universal, where I was programming Lindrum and playing pads. And Ed Green, I got to work with Ed Green, was playing kick, snare, and hat. And then who else was on that in the percussion section? Oh, there was Gary Coleman, Wendy and Lisa from Prince. Lisa Coleman's dad, Gary, was the legit percussionist on that. So that was Knight Rider with Don Peak. Then a few other, just to name a couple other things, Mostly Ghostly with Peter Neff. We had the magic scene in that we wrote, and working with Jack Nietzsche and Buffy St. Marie on the documentary Stripper. That was fun. Gary Wright, who did Dreamweaver. I did a movie with him. If you want to see more of my stuff, you could go to imdb.com, and a lot of my TV and film credits are up there, maybe about 80% of them. So popping into a record, when I got to work with Jeff and Joe P at the same time. So there's a label called Sheffield Lab at the time, and they only made live records. So I was doing a record with Claire Marlowe, and Jeff was off with Toto. So I was playing drums on half the record, and we were talking and saying, why don't we try to get Jeff to play? So it was Abe Sr., Luis Conte was playing percussion. I had Luis. And Jeff was like, yeah, I'm home. I'd love to do it. So I got Jeff and Joe P together. And we're working on, there's a couple covers, a couple songs I wrote with her. And so I produced, arranged, co-wrote, also playing on it. And so there's an old Stevie Wonder ballad that Jeff and Joe were both on at the same time. Now, this is a live record. 12 background singers in the lounge, mic'd up, at Sinead's studio, Bill's engineering. There's no overdubs. And we're on a 10, and Jeff P and Joe P and me are talking. Excuse me. And Jeff goes to his dad. He goes, "Yo, Joe, Dad." And he grabs it. He goes, "Can I see your tambourine?" And he goes, and Joe goes, "Yeah." And he hands it to him. He goes, "The part you're playing's working." He goes, "But I'm hearing something just a little simpler." And he goes, "Ka, ka, ka, shaga to ka." And Joe and I both look at each other and they're like, "Man, too bad we can't overdub that." And we all burst out laughing. And that was Jeff P. Anything he picked up, it just had that. It was just that Jeff P. time feel. And so Joe copped that part and played it beautifully. And it just kind of opened it up a little more. And so that was a beautiful thing about Jeff P. He was always there for the music, so giving, man, all the time. And he'd come early to the sessions. I remember being there early because I was producing, and he was there 5 minutes after me. He was always early. And I remember we were going to run into overtime, and he goes, "You want me to ask the guys just to do one more pass because I think you need one more?" He would do stuff like that all the time. And just working with him and his low forward motion of the time feel was just unlike anybody. I mean, he played the samba once on this record, and it was like a rock samba, like and his kick drum was doing ba-chka-dum, was the ostinato, not the ba-chka-dum, chka-da-chka-dum. He simplified it, he made it ba-chka-dum, ba-chka-dum, okay? But when he listened back to the track, the tempo was here, on the baffle out in the room, he was going like this, 1, with his hand, 1. And what I finally saw and figured out was when he's playing that tempo up there, his body's feeling halftime, which kind of gave him more of that wide time where he's hanging on the bar a little longer. It felt like that. But then with the lope of the right hand moving forward, and then, of course, if you know Jeff P's time feel, he had that left hand that laid back the snare drum just a little bit. Naturally, with the lope moving forward, and it just felt so good. Just a beautiful thing, man. Miss him dearly, and just unbelievable. And that record was the first time I heard one of my songs on the radio for the first time. After that record came out, a buddy of mine was picking me up to play golf, and through the clubs in the car, opened up the car door, and halfway through is a song that's on that record that I co-wrote with her. And I was just like, he goes, "Wow, what is this?" I said, "That's me, man. I wrote that. I co-produced it, wrote it." And that felt really great to finally hear something on the radio after all that work. And then, I remember feeling a little down one day, and I turned the television on, and there was a piece of music I wrote. Then I went to the bank. And there was a piece of music I wrote. I'm standing in line and heard music. Then I got in the car again, turned on the radio, and there was a song I wrote. Then I went to dinner that night with a friend, and there was a song I wrote was playing. And the owner goes, "What do you do?" And I go, I'm in the music business. I'm a musician. I write songs. I'm a composer. He goes, "What do you write?" I said, "I wrote that." And he goes, "No, really?" I said, No, I wrote that." Then I got home that night, and this is really kind of crazy. I turned the TV on again, and another piece of music of mine was on. So I said, "You know what? I guess everything's okay." You forget how much you're working and how much you're in it, and you forget, you don't really stop and listen anymore. You're just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And that day reminded me, you are doing stuff. You are creating. You are doing your thing. And another, I remember here in Rio Cantina, I wrote this for group Pocket Change, hearing that on the radio a lot, and other things I wrote. I did my record, Landscapes of Christmas. Some of that stuff was on the radio. I released that with an independent label. Then 2001, I wrote my first book, Drummer's Guide to Odd Meters. It's now an ebook available with Hal Leonard. If you're interested in any of my books, all you have to do is go to halleonard.com and type in my name, and you'll see all my other titles up there. And then in 2002, I started with Maria Martinez, co-writer and co-creator of World Beat Rhythms. And World Beat Rhythms was something Maria and I started, and we had a clinic series, started off at the Musicians Union, and all our companies supported it. And we had guest artists with us, Joe Porcaro, Matt Law, Kurt Pescara, Richie Garcia, to name a few. And we had a big ensemble. And World Beat was all about hybrid, drum set. Maria plays congas. I have my djembe set up. We have surdos, two-tone instruments, junjuns. We play bata compositions we wrote. A lot of hand percussion, bringing different instruments in. People would come in and sit in with us. Play the third. We had Zorro play the third bata part once we were out at PAS working. I mean, so it was kind of like we wanted to bring people in and play, and then get people in the audience at the end up playing with us. Very community about playing and performing, along with lessons along the way. And World Beat next year will be 20 years old. We've been doing it. We're still, during the lockdown, we did 7 Sam Ash clinics last year. Virtual clinics, because now, we were locked down. And so we moved into the virtual world. And we did, we've done PASIC, we did IAJE, we did NAM, TMEA, all the places, everywhere, all over the country. And World Beat's still going strong. And we have the World Beat series that's on Hal Leonard, Brazil, Africa, Cuba, USA. And you could play along with the audio if you're a drummer, with and without drum set, and just jump in on any of the percussion instruments. There's pictures, hand positions. There's all kinds of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Or come to a clinic and see us. So as my composing continued then all the way up to now, and I said you could visit IMDb. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my individual clinic program, and then we're going to get into the djembe with Jerry. But before that, Jules has a clip of Maria and I over at 𝗟𝗣 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦 studio playing a little meta drum thing, the Dharma meta drum, and she's playing Udu. Jules, can you play that, please? All right. Okay, so I'm back. Hope you like that. So some of my virtual and in-person clinics that I've been doing, I do my World Music Interactive Drum Clinic. Of course, we have the World Beat Rhythms clinic that we do with me and Maria. I do guest composer, TV and film. I'm doing that next week at NYU. Drum and bass connection, drums and jazz, real world studio on call, microphone tips for the studio. My signature program, one of them is Groovin' in Odd Times. And I wanted to show you just a few tips, and then Jules is going to play a little 7/8 clip of me behind the kit, kind of a Zoom sound check that played a little 7/8 feel kind of over the samba thing. So the first thing I like to just talk about, and this will be quick, is just commit to the lope of the time feel. So if you take a little LP8 shaker, I got my foot down here, quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I mean by lope is that forward motion of the time feel. So if I'm throwing down my shaker with 16th notes to the quarter note, that's the downbeat, forward lope. Down, down. Shaga, daga, 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 3 and 4 and. Now if I go to the upbeat of the and, that's the upbeat lope. And, check it. Now if I straighten it out, I call this the push lope. Okay, it's even. Now if I want to go 2, like samba, katas, katas, 1, cut 2, 1, and then if I want to swing it, like hip hop. So that's 5 different lopes. Okay, now, how do you stop counting and bring your time feel in? So if I'm going to play in 7/8, because this clip is in 7, I have to decide what I'm going to play to if I'm just playing in the air. So now I have 7/8. I'm thinking 2, 4, 3, 8. 2, 2, 3. So 1E and a 2E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and. Quarter note, dotted quarter note. My feet, ba, boom. That's my ostinato. Ba, boom, ba, ostinato, beat, ba, boom. Shaker, ba, ga-dong, ga-da, dong, ga-da, ga-dong, ga-da, dong. So now I'm going to sing a bass line so I'm not thinking about counting. Boom, 2, 1, 2, 3. Boom, ba da ba dee, boom, boom, ba da ba dee, boom, boom, ba da ba dee, boom, boom. I'm going to play upbeats of these 16ths. Dee, boom, boom, ba da ba dee, boom, boom, ba da ba dee, boom. So now I could go back and forth and play the bass and sing another rhythm. Boom, ba da ba dee, boom, boom, ba da ba dee, boom, ba ba digga, digga, ga, da da da, digga, digga. So you go back and forth between the two, bass and the rhythm. Ba ba dig digga da 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 digga digga da da dong da 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 ding dong da 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 ding dong ra ga ga da ga da 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 ra ga ga da ga da 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 dong da 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 ding dong da 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 ding dong ba 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 while the upbeats are going through. So you're feeling upbeats and downbeats. You got your downbeats here, and in your feet you got your upbeats here, and then you could reverse it. Play on this side. Right? Lead with the left. Play the upbeats with the right. That will help tune your body, and you go over to any instrument after that, and you're going to be good to go. 30 days doing that kind of stuff. Do it in 4. Same thing. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. I guarantee 30 days. All right. Jules, can you play the clip? So here's a little sound check Zoom clip before our clinic. Okay. All right. I think it's time to bring in 𝗟𝗣 LP Artist Relations rep.
There he is. Hey, Ed.
Jerry,
Good to see you, bud.
how you doing? It's good to see you, man. What's happening?
You are.
I haven't seen you.
Yeah, man. Good to see you. Yeah, I don't. When was the last time we saw each other? I guess it was at. Gosh, it must have been.
It was back in the at your office.
Okay,
you know.
yeah. I was gonna say at Sam Ash in Hollywood. I think it must have been too.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's a
man.
lot. Crazy stuff. Anyways,
thank you for taking the time. Thank you,
Oh,
man.
thanks for having me. Are you kidding me? It's a pleasure to be here with Jules and you. Too bad we can't see Jules. I know she's behind the scenes, but shout out to her. So I just want to talk a little bit about the djembe today, because it's kind of an unusual way how I kind of found the instrument and how I play it, which is kind of untraditional. But just a little history. The drum was invented around the 12th century and in West Africa, and is one of the oldest drums in existence, maybe 400 to 800 years old. It's been played by West Africans for generations, forming an integral part of their ritualistic life in Mali, Guinea, and Senegal, and other neighboring West African countries. It is said that blacksmiths made the first djembe drums. The drums were traditionally crafted of wood with metal rim and tuning rods or rope. The sharp, bright sound and dynamic range of the tones is played with bare hands on animal skin, goat, cow, antelope, or plastic, which is stretched over the top opening of the drum. Drum and head sizes vary from 7 to 18 inches in diameter. Tuning can be achieved by a tuning key on metal rods, okay, here, or tightening rope tuned, right? I have a tunable LP effects djembe here and a rope effects here. This is the 12.5, this is the 11.5. The djembe can be used both as an accompanying instrument and as a solo instrument. Now, in the back, when I showed the studio, I have a Richie Garcia 14-inch wooden drum back there. And then let's talk a little bit about the sound. And then I'm going to let Jerry talk a little bit about how the drums are made. There's a broad spectrum of sounds that can be produced and by using different hand positions on the drum head. One is the bass tone, which is the lowest tone that can be produced with the center of the drum head. So to get this tone, one's hand or fist must strike the drum with an immediate bounce to prevent the sound from muffling. So basically, here's your low tone. Now I could use the palm or my fist. You could hear the different sound with the fist on these drums sound a little more muffled. There's the fist. Here's the palm. Okay? So the middle or tenor or open tone can be achieved by playing with the fingers and palms towards the edge of the drum. So okay? Then how I do slaps, I'm not a conga player, so I go about it a couple different ways. I get a rocking slap, like so this motion. Then I get my other slap by muting the drum. Then I do a baby slap. And that's by doing this. Okay, so those are my slaps. Then finger strokes are also sometimes used to embellish the primary rhythms, right? So that's where the East Indian tabla stuff comes in. I'm not a tabla player, but I was drawn to the instruments because you got that low boom, right? So, and then you have other high, mid-range and higher pitches. Okay, so that's some of the finger stuff. Now I could also turn my hand over and use my nail, and I get a flamming sound. So, one finger, two.
Nice.
Um,
And your phone's playing along with you.
yeah, just I forgot to shut that off. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. You tuned it perfectly, actually. It's really good. We always talk about the non-traditional and just the hybrid use of the djembe as well. I know there's a lot of guys who use brushes and some organic brushes as well. Do you also apply that as well? Do you kind of use either metal or some of the organic brushes on the djembe
Absolutely,
as well?
Jerry. That's a great idea. And you know what? I just I even have a here's I don't have a pair of brushes here with me, but I mean I just saw this next one, but I could use this like it's my finger.
Nice.
I mean, just of course, then you could do this thing. Use the brush and right. That's another thing I do sometimes. But yeah, that's a great point. Bringing that in, absolutely. Stir the soup, play some rhythms, just like you're at the snare drum. But then then you could. What I like to use in one hand. So one brush. Then you could still get your boom. So if you wanted to do a in between,
Absolutely.
you could create sounds that way.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Because I've been seeing a lot of guys who incorporate the djembe in non-traditional use, but as well just on drum kit, on a cajon hybrid setup. So it's really cool to have that effect as well, kind of like you were doing it, kind of as a snare drum with the brushes.
Exactly.
So that's really neat.
Now that you said that, so what I do sometimes is to the left of my hi-hat, I put a djembe. And I treat it kind of almost play it then when whatever sticks I have in my hands, whether sticks or rods or bamboo, I'm playing it kind of like a timbale almost, over there.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
it just creates a different tone. It's just like, when Maria and I work with Worldbeat, we did the last show before the lockdown at University Village, and Joe P played with us. It was the last gig he ever did. He was the utility percussionist. We had a timbale up where the 12-inch tom usually is. We had the kit. We had a 4-piece DW kit, but we took the 12 off and we put a timbale up there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Perfect. Wow,
just to add another color, like you were saying.
Beautiful.
And then we had cowbell attached to the bass drum.
Yeah.
Then djembe to the left. And just adding a couple things like that. And then being able to sit at the kit too. And like I was saying, I'm playing shaker, playing kick and snare, playing your hands on the drums or a brush, that kind of thing. Just incorporating some of the instruments, around the kit.
Absolutely. Speaking of Maria Martinez, there she is.
Hey, Maria. Come on, let's trade fours.
Another fellow LP family member as well, so it's really good to see everybody connect.
Absolutely. Gotta love her.
So you guys do a lot. You work all the time together doing the clinics, and my question is how has, with the pandemic and the closure and the lockdown, how has that affected you as a musician, as a composer, as a clinician, educator? Obviously a lot of people are adjusting to this, virtual world that we're living in right now. But it seems like you got a really cool setup, a really neat setup here. That's like you have multiple cameras, you got, really cool backdrop and different angles. And so are you doing a lot of clinics virtually? And if so, how's that working out for you?
Yeah, it took a minute because the room was already set up, like I was saying, but had to get the cameras and the lighting set up and then be able to move around where I could actually be in here by myself and switch cameras easily and then switch microphones. I mean, sonically, the music sounds better on Zoom. That seems to be the sonically, as far as instrument sounding on the platforms. But it's, at first it took a minute. And then the fact that you can't play together in real time, really, I mean, people are trying to do it, and if they're on a server closer, and there's some programs that they're using, but it's really, from a drummer standpoint of it, it just really doesn't feel one isn't one. So what Maria and I do, we trade 4 and 8 bar phrases back and forth. That's how we do it. And when I'm working on clinics alone, I do the same thing. Like I worked with a teacher, a professor, he was a sax player. So we played over Coltrane's Afro Blue. He played the melody. I took the next 8. It's an 8 bar tune. He took the next 8. I took the next 8. You could keep the tune going in the form structure. You just kind of do that. So that's because you can't play together. And then if you want to get people involved, everyone has to stay muted. You listen to people one at a time. So for instance, if I'm at a university and I want to hear someone play, then everyone's muted and then they play. And then if I want to show them something, I play back. So that's the adjustment. So yes, the big thing is I miss being next to somebody and next to a band and playing. I'm dying to do it.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm really missing. The positive part of it is being in my own room. I have all my instruments, all the instruments that you guys gave me, and I have all my instruments around. They're around me, and they're easy to get to. Other than swapping something out, Jerry, there's no setup. The setup is technology.
Right.
Right. That making sure everything's working and running right, and that's been the big thing. I work with a guy, Fred Engler. He's in South Carolina, and he techs everything with me, and we get everything sounding right. And we have found that most of the schools are using Zoom. We did StreamYard with Sam Ash, and some of the smaller independent schools are using Google Meet and Microsoft Teams, but the music doesn't translate as well. Zoom, the music translates the best. The audio engine's the best. And if you're, I'm running Pro Tools, Loopback, and with the UA, a UA interface, Apollo.
Wow. So you pretty much had to adjust with everything that's happening, obviously. But yeah, it looks like you got an amazing setup. I mean, it's great.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we, Fred and I, we're worked on it. Maria worked on hers, and when we're working together, and then if I'm working alone, which I do a lot, it's just integrating in with the school you're working with. How's their setup? Are people hardwired? I'm hardwired here. That always helps.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And just being able to feel like you're connecting. That's why it's nice seeing people on screens. The students with their cameras on, and you could see them, and it feels a little bit like you're in the room with them, and so that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I totally get the not being actually physically there for to be a mentor there in person as well. Yeah, that's absolutely. But it's really cool to hear that you had an amazing mentor too. You had like all these amazing people that were helping you out as well, like Joe Porcaro. I mean, that's really cool to hear about all the loaning of gear whenever you needed something, or if passing down a gig to somebody. And I think that's an important thing nowadays, to have obviously it's, things are different right now with the pandemic, but having a mentor like that, or somebody to kind of guide you in a sense like that, towards your career as a drummer, as a percussionist. So that's really cool.
Very, very grateful and fortunate to been able to be around and meet those certain people at a young age. I mean,
Yeah.
and and I haven't had to do anything else but this, other than being a paper boy. It's just, I just, sometimes you make up your mind about something and you get lucky. What I mean by you get lucky, you have to be prepared when you hit all those points. But lucky meaning, I was lucky to meet, like when I met Tommy. You could say, well, I was lucky. Yeah, but I put myself there to meet him at the clinic. And then you know what I mean? You have to be proactive, is what I try to tell people. Try to think outside the box. Do something a little different. If everybody's running over here, maybe you should run over here.
Well said. Beautiful.
Well
said.
So, I have a hybrid approach for the instrument. The sound has worked really well, and the tones have blended in my composing work that I've been doing for years, and it works great in with World Beat with the group, and all the layering I do. And since I've joined the LP family, thank you, Jerry and Jules and Scott and everyone, and Derek Zimmerman. The LP djembes are much easier on my hands to play. My hands used to get beat up, as you know, Jerry. We're playing my other drums. The way the heads lay on these drums, my fingers don't get beat up like they used to. They just don't.
Nice.
So that's been fantastic.
That's great. Yeah. And I noticed on your other side you have the Dharma drums, which is something that really cool to see that kind of setup as well. Do you use those for your clinics? Do you use those for composing as well?
I've been using those in my composing. I use them for colors. You know what I mean? And just like any other tonal instrument, as an overdub. What I try to do is, I don't like to get stuck using samples and playing samples on keyboards and pads all the time. I like to have, as you could see, I like having be surrounded by my instruments, and all my other instruments are up against the wall. So, excuse me, by the time, I could audition 10 Certo samples, but all I have to do is put it and record, and I could go back there and play my Streetcan Certo part. Or I have 2 other Certos here that I could just move around and put up and mic. Or, I have another Certo in LA at 𝗟𝗣 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥 studio with another PDP concept kit, wooden hoop,
nice.
And world percussion stuff there. I have stuff at Marco Barsamano's studio, his place, setups there. So when I'm working in LA, I have other setups. So I like having the instruments and be able to, say Claytone, I would like to just, grab it, put Pro Tools and record and start playing it instead of building a Claytone sample from a keyboard, playing it. I mean, so that's why this room's set up the way it is.
Nice. The real
Because
thing.
I could just stream of consciously move around and play. And then when I'm playing from the keyboard too, it's great. And mix and match and using loops and playing in real time.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. It shows here that you've been working with Quincy Jones, Herbie Hancock, man, and to hear your story with Frank Zappa is incredible. But how was it working with Quincy and Herbie?
Well, Quincy, he had a company called Scores Are Us years ago. He was doing a lot of stuff for TV and film, and I worked on some of that stuff back in the percussion area, doing some Linn drum programming, playing some shakers and things like that. And then I got to see, I hadn't seen him in a while, and they were giving him an award for an ASCAP award during the awards ceremony for the composers, and I was there, and Lifetime Achievement Award. And I ran into him washing my hands at the sink in the bathroom, and we started talking, and we're talking and talking, and before you know it, 10 minutes, you know, that's the way Quincy is. When he's with you, he's with you. And I'm going, man, you got to go up on stage and call your name. He goes, no, we're talking here. He's very focused when you're talking to him. His eyes aren't wandering. I mean, it's a total gift. That's you know, he's fantastic. I mean, that's the thing I really remember about him is that you feel like when he's really present and with you, you know?
Nice. Wow. That's great.
You know, working with Joe Sample was great. Herbie Hancock, he was doing a show called Mike Hammer. His band was stranded. We got called from a contractor, Johnny Oliver, to be there to play Rocket and then Ollie Brown, the drummer, is there. And I go, why aren't you playing drums? You know, Ollie Brown, who played on all the Jacksons hits, and Ollie said, I'm going to scratch. He goes, you're playing drums. So that was fun.
Man.
You know, because I got to meet Herbie and I got to meet Ollie Brown. I had never met Ollie Brown. And at the time, he had a hit song. There was a band called Ollie and Jerry, and they had a hit out. Just that had happened recently.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow, Ed, thank you so much. Really, where can we find what you're up to? Are you on social media?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Clinic? Yeah, absolutely. At Roscetti Music for there you go. Jules has it up there.
Perfect.
Instagram and Twitter, and Roscetti Music for Facebook. Not my name, Ed Roscetti. Just Roscetti Music.
There you go.
But before we go, Jerry, I want to just do some thank yous, please. You just let me know when you want me to do that.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. But a big thank you to Jules Thomas for producing this, and Jerry Zacharias. Jerry, thank you, buddy.
Man.
I look forward when we can break bread. And also, Jules, I look forward to seeing you too, hopefully soon. I want to thank Scott Donnell, Derek Zimmerman, Garrison, Akbar, Stephen Vega, Ruby Montes, Don and Lombardi, and John Good for all their support. Thank you to my tech, Fred Engler. Shout out to him. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me today. It was an honor and pleasure to be here with you. Hope to see you in person at one of my clinics soon. Take care, everybody. Be safe and be well.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.